Okay, thank you so much, Scott, for your time. Since we're at GFA here and everybody is excited about the finals tonight, I just wanted to have, if you could give us a little overview over your days as a competitor playing competitions, and maybe a few takeaways from that time.
Yeah. When I was younger, I did pretty much every competition that was available then. There are many more competitions now. But the big competitions then were the Toronto International Festival and the Radio France. And then not far after that, the Tokyo competition became much bigger with bigger prizes and everything, so I entered that too. But I tried out for these competitions several times before I got in. You had to send in a cassette. Okay. Back when there were cassettes, those are cassettes. You look them up on the Wikipedia. And but I think so. Now there are competitions that have much bigger money, bigger, more prestigious prizes. I mean, bigger concerts, tours. Even the GFA offers a tour, which is great because that. A prize like that, like a tour, really is a good opportunity for the player to wonder if they're cut out for it or not. Because everybody here, from the juniors on up, they're thinking I'd love to be on that stage playing concerts, right, for people. So when you win the prize and you go out and do the tour, it's a different thing. I mean, it's just you have to be. That's when you realize what it is to be a professional, and it's more about the travel and the trying not to be tired and all that, but than it is about the playing. So I think it's really important that you have worked hard already to really work on your playing, so that when you get out on a tour like that, and I'm not saying that when I said that the tour is. I don't mean it's not about the playing, but you realize when you're in the middle of it that there's so many other things involved, and so it does kind of weed out those who really do want to do it and have the passion for it, and those who figure, well, this is pretty hard. So I think a tour is a great prize because it again really separates the ones who really want to do it and those who maybe don't in the end. But anyway, so I got sidetracked there. One thing that hasn't changed, I think, is that you have to. The most important thing, and I've judged a few competitions too since my competing days, and it's really important to play what you feel sincerely represents your musical tastes. Now there's always something that you are required to play, which is a good test. But in general, the repertoire you pick, the one mistake I see is that people pick repertoire they think the judges and the audience want to see. Now, these are all good players, and so they're able to pull that off. But in the end, musically, you can tell if it fits them or not. If they're just showing it off for flash or whatever, because there's so much flash, there's so much, the players nowadays are so physically much more capable than when I was younger, and that's just the way of things. This is in the sports and everything. People, the bar just gets raised higher and higher and higher. If you've ever seen old tennis matches back in the day, and the tennis players now, there's no comparison with the power and the athleticism. It's the same kind of thing in music, I think. Not just guitar. I think the younger people are playing better and better and better. There are more younger players coming up, so the physical abilities of these players when they get to the competition stages is just mind-blowing. Really, it's very inspiring. But to get to the musicality level, it does take a little bit of life experience, a little bit living with things. So anyway, I was saying the thing that hasn't changed really is, I think those that do well, not that win first place necessarily, but those that do well, because you can get fourth prize or not even in the first four and still have a great career. if you really want to do it. If you're sincere with yourself and choose good repertoire that fits you, you'll go much further than if you try to please everybody, because you're not going to please everybody ever. So in the end, when you're up there, it's pretty lonely on stage, even though all these people are looking at you from stage to stage to stage to stage every night. You have to be happy with yourself and what you're doing. So I think that's the one factor that people need to look at, is just to be happy with yourself and sincere.
I see. And also a question that I find interesting is, when do we know we're ready to compete? When should like a player decide, okay, I'm competing? Because I know many people are in for the thrill or to participate. Many people say, I know many teachers encourage their students to participate in competition, even if they know something's not completely ready. Mm-hmm. What is your take on that as a teacher and former competitor?
Well, I think the only way to know if you're ready is just to do it
mm-hmm.
at some point. Now, it's not good to be pushed into it or I've seen that where certain, maybe younger competitors might be pushed into things when they're not ready, or even, and not just competitions, but repertoire in general. If you have a good sense, first of all, you should have a good sense of what the level of competition is before you enter. And if you think you might have a chance, and you're strong enough for rejection, because that's going to happen at some point. If you don't think that's going to faze you and you think you have a good chance, then it's worth giving it a try. You won't really know if it's your thing unless you give it a try. So that's what I would say. Just go for it. Now, it's great if you have a teacher you can work with or a mentor that can kind of guide you and tell you with their experience if they think you're ready or not, and somebody you trust. But in general, it's just good to kind of go into something and then you realize I like it or I don't like it.
I see. Okay, cool. Okay, let's talk about pumping nylon.
Okay.
And everybody, I think there's like one guitarist that doesn't know pumping nylon. So I thought maybe it would be like interesting to know from you, the author of the book, a little bit of little backstory on when did you decide to write the book, when you decide how long did it took you, and why do you think that pumping nylon became the standard for guitar technique?
It took me 2 years, roughly 2 years from the time I started writing by hand to the time it actually came out.
It was the time of the cassettes, right?
Time of the cassettes. 8 tracks were done, thank God. And I honestly, it was just, it was basically a tool for me, something I could take to my students and work with them, instead of having everybody's, a little bit from this, a little bit from that, and all these copies and handwritten copies and Xerox copies and of various things. I thought, I just need to get my ideas organized. Mm-hmm. And so to do that, I just kind of had to sit down and organize right hand, left hand. It is not or was not ever intended to be a method. So it's just it's a reference book. You can't go through it from page 1 to the end. And I've had people who've tried that, and it's not that kind of book. So it was basically a tool for me as a teacher. And the guinea pigs were, I was teaching up at the San Francisco Conservatory at the time. I taught there for 4 years, and even though I was living in LA at the time. And it was during that time, between 89 and 93, that I was putting all this together and was kind of throwing this material at them, and this works and that works, and tweaking things. And I don't know, then I got it organized, and I thought, well, I always joked about writing a book called Pumping Nylon, because I was really into lifting weights when I was a kid. There's nobody that didn't have Pumping Iron, or Franco Columbo's book. Franco Columbo was Schwarzenegger's training partner. And I always thought, how funny would it be, you know? But you have to be careful what you joke about, because it could come to. So we did. I was teaching at this summer workshop in Connecticut at the time, and we decided to put together a workshop one day called Pumping Nylon. And Jim Ferguson, who was the editor of Guitar Player at the time, came. It was a full room, and he was, he brought his guitar and he sat in, and he really loved it, and it was really fun. I mean, it was kind of like doing an aerobics class or something. Not that I do aerobics, but it was just kind of leading people through this process. And he said, let's do an article. So it started out as an article in Guitar Player, and I don't know what year this was. It was probably 92, early 90s. And it started out as an article called Pumping Nylon, with some of the printed material, the musical material in there and everything, photos. And then from there, I just thought, well, let's just put it in a book. Again, not thinking it would sell at all. I just wanted a copy for me and my students. So then I could just say, here, let's work with this. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we did. I called around to a few publishers, and a couple said no right away, it's not feasible. And then I went to the workshop, who was publishing with Alfred. Mm-hmm. And I said, what do you think? And they said, well, let me get back to you. And in 5 minutes, they called me back and said, we'll do it. I said, great. I have it pretty much done. And so then I bought my first computer, which had 4 meg of RAM. I was really excited because it was upgradable to 8 meg of RAM. And I learned it totally on the fly, just trying to type everything in, and it just took me forever. So that took months right there. And that's it. And then it became a book, And it started off, it started off selling pretty well. Everybody was, because I think there was a void, that we had really great methods, at the time. We had good methods on how to play, great anthologies, but everything was separate, and to learn this, you had to go to that book, and then to learn this, you had to go to that. And so it was kind of there's a little bit of everything, but kind of in detail. And and we did the best we could. There were drawings instead of photos, because we thought that might be a little clearer, whatever. So it kind of filled a void at the time. I think that's why it was so popular. Yeah. And the whole joke was, I was insistent that it had to have an arm on the cover, So they found some stock photo, and then took a picture of Nat Gounod's guitar, who was the editor, because we needed a guitar, and that was the cover, So that's kind of how it began, and it's just kind of took off from there.
Great, the rest is history.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit, because you mentioned earlier that there's more and more great players, and we all witness how the level of guitar playing steadily, year from year, rises and gets higher and higher. So obviously, it seems like just playing well, playing fast, playing secure, and winning a few competitions, seems to us not enough to lead and start a sustainable, successful career in music. Is there any advice, or what are your thoughts on how aspiring young musicians could think of starting a successful career in the guitar world, or in music in general?
Yeah, it's much easier these days. I mean, you have YouTube. I mean, you could do more honestly with YouTube than any competition. Now competitions have monetary prizes, but if people see you out there, and out there these days means, internet, right? So I would say, and just gauging from my students too, if it's not on YouTube, it doesn't exist. I'll give them an assignment, and they'll come back the next week, and what do you have for me? Because, well, couldn't find it. What do you mean you couldn't find it? We have it in the library. Well, but it's not on YouTube. I said, well, believe me, it's in the library. It's that building over there, So anyway, YouTube, and I have to admit, I use it too. I look, if I hear of a player, or I'm in sort of a partnership with this LA Sound Foundation that kind of on the board, where we talk about who to bring in, and we'll often just go to YouTube and see, because that's their publicity material right there. So that right there can make a career. Pepe Romero told me a long time ago, and I still think this is true, that you should do a competition for the prize. they're generally not really satisfactory musical experiences, you know, because it's a you're on show. So pick competitions that have good prizes that you think you want monetarily or tour-wise or whatever, and do those. But you can't expect people to knock on your door just because you win. I learned that after entering competitions, and when I won the Tokyo competition, which was my last competition in '89, I took it upon myself to send all these flyers out and be my own manager, and that's when I started getting a lot of concerts. But people don't knock on your door. So these days there are much more direct ways to, if you can just tell somebody, here's my YouTube channel, they'll hire you from that, you know. And so I think in fact, back in the day we used to have a good black and white glossy photo, a bio, maybe a flyer. We all printed up these super fancy flyers and had, of course, the cassette tape inside the folder. And all that now is online. You just go, there it is. So I would say set yourself up well online. But primarily, really, I mean, to have a career playing as a performing musician, you have to love it, because that's the only thing that's going to sustain you. Again, it can be if you're successful, it's a busy life, but it can be pretty lonely, just going from place to place to place. You meet a lot of people, there's a sea of faces, and you have to be really happy with what you're doing, and you have to love it. And the ones that are successful, I always go back to my teacher, Pepe Romero, one of my main teacher, Pepe Romero, when I was 14. He's in his 70s now, and he still loves it, you know. The travel's getting a little to him, you know. It's still annoying after all these years, but it's playing music for people. He just loves it, and because of that, he will always be, until the day he decides to stop doing it, if he ever does, he will be successful and happy doing it. So you have to be sincere with yourself, first and foremost.
Right, then no, thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet.